on Castleberry. Welcome to my philosophical lecture shorts. I apologize, my voice is going a bit for this week. But this week we're going to talk about Martin Heidegger and his idea of Dasein, or being in the world, and the they self as our everydayness. Okay, quite a bit there. Now, in order to talk about Martin Heidegger, you can't not talk about him without bringing up his main question, which, being in time, is what he's really looking at. And what he wants to do is to reopen the question of being. So we aren't today going to be talking about that. We'd have to give an entire introduction to being in time for that. We are specifically going to talk about his idea of a human being and who we are and our relation to others. Okay. Now, what he calls that is Dasein. So that's where we're going to begin. So basically, to ask the question of being, according to Heidegger, we have to go to the site of being, like a job site. Okay. But that site of being is you, or as he calls it, Dasein, which in German is just the everyday word for existence. But in later translations into English, we kept the word here. But in newer translations, such as the Jones Stambaugh version, is you put a hyphen in the middle. What Heidegger wants to show here with us being Dasein, or existence, he wants to kind of show us what these two words mean separately to really kind of figure it out. And in German, okay, da, right here, means there, but it also means here. Okay, it's the same word. Depending on the context and how you say it, I can say da or da. Okay, so there. And sein, okay, to go with the title sein and sein, all right? Sein is to be, or being, okay, like our verb is. Okay, so basically what we have for Dasein is the there being, or we like to call it being there. Okay, we are, Dasein is a being that's there. Okay, he's trying to get that we aren't only just here, we're all there. All right. Now, as Heidegger begins to explain who we are by first starting this way, he wants to say there's relations within Dasein that are always there. He calls them equal primordial to each other. So what he's trying to say is there's these fundamental relations that everyone has, that there is no farther we can reduce them to. Okay, there are things that must be there, but none of them, okay, are hierarchy. There's no one that is more of us than the other. What he's trying to say is these relations we're about to talk about are all within you, Dasein, but none of them are necessarily better than the other, or one we can say this is who we really are and this isn't. They are all just a part of us, and so he uses the word equal primordial. They are all just as necessary. You take one of these things away, one of these relations away, you are no longer you, a human being, okay? So keep that in mind. So the first step is, now that we say what Dasein is, an existence, it's a being that is there, okay? Where is this there? What is this there we're talking about? And this there is we are always within what he calls a world. This is where we get probably the most common understanding of Dasein, and most people like to use as we are a being in the world. Okay? All right, we are a being that is always within a world. And what he means by that, there is no human being, okay, that is ever isolated from a world. There's no human being we can separate. One thing in Western tradition is we always want to take the human being out of the world and what is it on their own. Heidegger's trying to point out there is no human being that's on their own. They are always within a particular situation or world. Okay. Now, he doesn't mean a world in the sense of I'm standing here on Earth, though we can think of it this way. World is like a possibility. We are always within a particular possible world in which we were then, but you can never remove it. And this world is always, always relational to me, okay? I am always relating myself to this world that I am within, this situation I am always in. For right now, my world, maybe it makes up, have a physical understanding of the world, but my world also revolves around my job as a teacher, in which I'm taking on this certain possibility right now of teaching a class through an online video. All right, there's always a situation. I'm always embedded in one, and there's always a relation that it has towards me. Okay, and another term I'd like to use with this is the world is contextual. Though some Heidegger scholars don't use this word, I do. Okay, I think it's a word that helps us understand what he's saying. The world is contextual, and it's not in this way in the sense of there is a physical world that is out there, an objective world, and I come along into it, and then I put my context or opinion about what it is, like subjectively on it. But there's still a world under my opinion, and it's contextual like that. That is not what Heidegger means. He literally, I believe, means the world itself is a context. that one way in which it can show up is a physical, objective world, think of it that way. But that's not the only way the world can appear. That's one context. We could also appear, if you were in ancient Greece, you wouldn't think of it the same thing like that. Or if you were during the Middle Ages, your context would probably be something of a mix of what Christianity says and what Aristotle says, okay? And have a total different understanding of what your world is. The world itself is always within a context, and it is context, okay? There's no necessarily dominant way the world is objectively, though it always appears in a particular way for each of us, okay? Now I know this was really one of the hardest parts to get, but it's really important that we do, okay? Because Heidegger does not want us to put down that we are some subject-object relation, or we are a being standing on this earth, and that is exactly what it is. That is one particular way in which the world can show up. But for Heidegger, there must be a more fundamental idea of what the world is for anything like a physical or a subject-object world to appear in the first place, okay? So he goes on to say that we are a being in this world, but we are also always thrown into this world. And he says this: we are always thrown into a world that is already taken care of. That is already taken care of. Okay? He says we are thrown into a world that is already taken care of. What does it mean? Well, the first thing, it literally means like we are thrown like a pitch. Okay? We are born into this world, thrown into it. And this world, when we're here, is already taken care of. Now, what does he mean by that? Well, what does it mean to take care of something? It's been handled. It's been understood. I got it. Don't worry about it. Okay? What he means is that every time we've been thrown into a world, there is already an understanding that pre-exists us, that is already working, and already a way in which it's understood, and that I'm just kind of thrown into it, and it begins reacting with me. For example, here it is. We are coming to the world in which there's already understandings of things. For example, there's an understanding of the sun when I was born, and I come into it and learn it. What is that? Well, it's actually a star, okay, that's burning very brightly, and it has this gravitational force which we are all around, and there's one of many stars, and actually it's an insignificant star compared to some of the other ones, okay? It's already taken care of. There's an understanding of the world already, or the objects within it. But if we were the Mayans, okay, and we were thrown into a world, that understanding of the sun, there would still be an understanding of the world and what it is and what the sun is within it, as well as other things, but it would be different. For the Mayans, it's taken care of, but the sun is a god to them. It would be totally understood differently. But the thing that we have in common in all human beings is that we are thrown into a world, it has been taken care of by others already. There is already an understanding that pre-exists us, and when we come into the world, it is already reacting with us. We are relating to it. So far, Dasein is a being there. That there is a world. So we are a being in a world which is a relational to me and contextual. But that I'm always thrown into it, and this world is already taken care of. It already has a pre-existing relation to me. And I kind of become aware within this taken care of world when I begin to understand things. Okay? So, now, where do we go from here? Okay? He says this world is also a with world. Okay? So the world we are in, that we are, all right, is also a with world. All right? What he means is, along in this world that is always there, there is also these other fundamental elements that are along with me. And the first one, he says, is being with. Okay? He says we are always, every human being is always in a world with ready-at-hand objects, objects that are already there at hand for us to use. Okay? So ready at hand objects. He uses, for example, a hammer. Okay? Or right now, the eraser. Okay? These ready-at-hand objects are always here. And what he wants to point out is these objects aren't on their own in the sense of it's isolated and I have no relation to me. All of these ready-at-hand things, the objects in the world, okay, always have a relationship to me. They are relational as well, okay? They're relational. He wants to make this clear. There is no object that isn't. For example, the hammer, okay? I may have a hammer that is sitting in my closet. The hammer is related to me now as the hammer I'm not really paying much attention to but speaking about. Or it's maybe the hammer my dad gave me to fix some things around my apartment, which I never do. Or it's the hammer that I got when I was younger and still using now that reminds me of maybe my childhood and my first thing I worked on. Or the hammer that I'm using now to hang this picture, okay? Every object is always related to me in some way. Or the chalk over there that I'm now talking about, but before was there, but still something that really didn't come to mind. It's always some relational, even if that relationship seems negative. for example, something I'm not caring about, okay, or the chair I don't worry about. These ready-at-hand objects, it's not just them isolated on their own, they are always, just like the world, in a relationship towards Dasein, or you, me, okay? So, we are in this world with ready-at-hand objects, but that isn't just it. We are also, let's go up here, which is fundamental to Dasein. We are also a Mit-Dasein, okay? Now, mit in German is with, and Dasein once again is you. So what we see is we are with Dasein. We are with others. Other people who are also, or other things that are also Dasein. There are other Dasein that always exist within my Dasein. Okay? That's you I'm talking to now. Or even though there's no Dasein in the room, there are some around here in the hallways. Okay? We could call it Dasein with. This is how it's usually translated into English. Okay? We are always with others. But these others, he wants to point out, strike us differently than ready-at-hand objects, okay, and then other things in the rest of the world. He says it strikes us with what he calls concern, or we may use the word solicitude. The German word is Vorsorge, okay? The word we translate it as is either concern, or a really good one is solicitude. So there we go. Now, we can ask ourselves, does these Dasein concern us? Okay, now, what does it mean to be concerned? Now, the typical understanding of concern in English is to be worried about something. I'm worried, like, oh, I'm concerned about your grade, I need to help you out, or your father or mother's concerned about what you're going to be doing in school, or I'm concerned about my children, something along these lines, okay? They worry. But what Heidegger is pointing out is a more fundamental and more broad understanding of concern. It's at this level, is this type of concern he's talking, only a worry has to be based off of. So to be able to worry must be based off, he says, a more fundamental idea of concern. And what I think concern means here, or solicitude, is more that we are engaged with others always, okay? And what he means is I can concern myself, and might be worried about it, but I also can concern myself in the sense of I am concerned with you because I like you, and I think you're doing well, and right now I'm concerning myself thinking about you. Or maybe you're the stranger on the street that I'm not paying attention to. You are the person I am not worried about right now, okay? That I am also concerned with you. In some way, my Dasein is concerned about you, but it's not always worry. It could be I'm concerned in happiness or in joy, okay? These things can happen. Or I'm concerned in being indifferent, or just being tolerant to you, okay? It's a more fundamental, and I like the word, we are engaged with them in some way. Engaged, or perhaps absorbed with them in some way, even if that absorption is something, and we would consider a negative absorption, like I'm not worried about you. You're walking by me and I don't pay attention to you until you do something, and now I'm engaged in another way, or concerned in another way. But these Dasein concern us, okay? Now, from this point, he goes on to say, once we become in this kind of engagement or concernful or solicitudeness that we have with them, okay? He says there are two positive modes of concern, two extremes, okay? So what he wants to put, he puts two extremes in a way we can kind of relate ourselves or engage ourselves with these Dasein. One way he seems to refer is inauthentic. He doesn't mean bad. He just means gets further away from what it means to be a person, okay? And one way, this extreme possibility, is gets more authentic, that opens up who we really are and who they really are. He's not saying it's good or bad. Just one's an authentic relationship in which Dasein as ourselves and who they are open up, and the other one is where it doesn't open up in this way. And there could be all types of places in between these two. It's more of a scale. Right, and the two modes of concern here, the extreme modes, are first what he calls leaping in, or to leap in, and the other one he will call to leap ahead. Leaping ahead. Now let's talk about these first. Let's talk about leaping in. It says leaping in is a way in which we react or respond to the other in a way we dominate them or take them over and doing something for them. And though Heidegger might not approve it in Kantian terms, maybe treating them as a means or objectifying them. For example, for you, I may be leaping in for you if I just treat you as students who I need to do, make sure you pass the class so I can keep my job. Or I do this online video for you just so you give me good responses on your reviews, and therefore I can keep my job, but that's all you are to me. I'm treating you in some way as an object. Heidegger will read right here, which is in the Sternbach version on page 114, 121 in the German. He says this, or 122 in the German. He says, with regard to its positive modes, concern has two extreme possibilities. It can, so to speak, take the other's care away from him and put itself in the place of taking care. It can leap in for him. Concern takes over what is to be taken care of for the other. The other is thus displaced. He steps back so that afterwards, When the matter has been attended to, he can take it over as something finished and available, or disburden himself of it completely. In this concern, the other can become one who is dependent and dominant, even if that domination is a tacit one and remains hidden from him. This kind of concern, which does the job and takes care away, is, to a large extent, determinative for being with one another, and pertains, for the most part, to our taking care of things at hand. Okay, that is leaping in. A way I like that of taking care of things at hand, I'm treating you like an object in some way, using you. You don't, in this way, I close you off to who you are. And as Heidegger would describe it, I close off your possibilities of you becoming something else. And as I do this, I'm also closing off who I really am. Because don't forget, Dasein is who I am. Okay, it's, or being with other Dasein is part of me. So if I'm closing you off, I'm also closing myself off. And this is why he calls it inauthentic. Not bad, but inauthentic, because it closes off who Dasein truly is. Now, the other mode is leaping ahead. In this way, I leap ahead of them in a way in which he says, I free Dasein for themselves. Not only do I open my own possibilities, it's a way of reacting with the other in which their possibilities of who they are also open up themselves and free themselves to understand themselves as this, a being within a world which is taken care of with other objects and also with other Dasein. Okay? And he says right here, in contrast to this, there is a possibility of concern, which is not so much leap in for the other as leap ahead of him. Not in order to take care away from him, but first to give it back to him as such. This concern, which essentially pertains to authentic care, that is, the existence of the other, and not to what which it takes care of, helps the other to become transparent to himself in his care and free for it. And later down here he says this, when referring to, well, first to leaping in. The being with one another of those who are employed at the same thing often thrives on mistrust. So usually when we're competing for the same thing in the job, you are my enemy, or the person I'm competing, I'm trying to beat you, and that's all you are. But if we're leaping ahead, on the other hand, when they devote themselves to the same thing in common, their doing so is determined by their Dasein, which has been stirred. This authentic alliance first makes possible the proper kind of objectivity, which frees the other for himself in his freedom. That freedom is to be Dasein. Now, this reminds me a lot, though we cannot take the autonomy as rationality or being rational beings. Heidegger does not mean that at all, and Heidegger might not approve of this because of the undertones it may say, or may bring, but this always reminds me of the Kantian means to an ends. Leaping in seems, though means, I think, is too specific. It needs to be much more broader for Heidegger. In this way, we are using someone, okay? They're just something I need to get through, and I don't see you as a Dasein. But in leaping ahead as being with you as an end in itself, I understand you as Dasein as you are, and I try to react with you in a way that not only opens up your possibilities, but also opens up mine. And another mundane example that I really like, whether Heidegger would agree or not, I think it really works here, is the old adage about teaching a man to fish. Do you teach a man to fish, or do you fish for him? Leaping in would be fishing for him. In this way, you're doing it so that when it's done, it's ready for him to take care of afterwards. He can eat. But the problem is, it doesn't open up those possibilities of what it can be. He needs me at every moment if this is going to happen. But in leaping ahead, I teach him to fish. In this way, not only can he fish for himself from now on, it opens up new possibilities of fishing. He can, so to speak, let's say he can use new tackle to see if that will help him catch different fish, or use different types of bait. And he also, since if all this fishing works at this lake, maybe that pond across the street, okay, maybe the fishing works there too in the same way. And it opens up his possibilities to become a fisherman. Okay? So in this way, I open up him. All right? Now, this isn't the final thing, a word on Dasein. There is one other major part that's equal primordial that is always there, and it really is important to trying to find what it means to be an authentic Dasein. We really need to discuss this, and this is what he calls the they-self, which gives us our everyday character of the world, which tends to have this already covered up. We don't see ourselves as this because typically we're absorbed in the they-self. And he needs to describe it. The they-self will always be with us, but we need to talk about that, and then perhaps how could we maybe unentangle or unabsorb ourselves from this they-self, and what would require that. That will be in the second part of this lecture. Okay? Thank you very much. I'll see you next time.